So the provincial government may not be able to control the global climate, but it can control logging on public land in British Columbia. And this requires a replacement of the current legislation. And I talked about this more when we were on Vancouver Island, because Vancouver Island logging is more on private land. It can also affect what happens on private land, and the Kootenays would be interested in this as well, because there's more private land in the Kootenays. So what we've got now is legislation that's based on an outdated paradigm. The new Forest Act will be based on a new paradigm of ecological management. So in the middle there, we've got all of this outdated industrial paradigm stuff, where the dominant value is timber supply and profits. And those are the objectives as well. The policy influencer is private interests. The business model in the market are large, quite often multinational corporations, and it's monopolistic. The outcomes that they are seeking are a high volume of production. The products are raw logs, dimension lumber, fiber, and a big concern around here, pellets. Decision-making is centralized. Silviculture focuses on tree farms. Herb talked about the damage that tree farms are doing to BC ecosystems. The logging method, most of the time it's clear cutting, where they're removing all the parts and pieces and destroying or interfering with the processes, and sometimes they call it different things, right? What else are they calling clear cutting these days? Michelle, what are some of the terms you've heard? Clear cutting with reserves.
Creating future old growth.
Creating future old growth? Okay, good. Okay, they haven't gone that far. Okay.
There's like recruitment. It's old growth recruitment.
Old growth recruitment. Okay.
Forestry term that they use when they log something and then set it aside to not be logged in the future, so that it will become old growth in the future.
Okay, so they leave a little patch and they're saying they cut it.
And then they say we won't cut that part again ever.
Oh.
It can become old growth.
We won't cut that part again ever, so it will become old growth. Retention. All right, so a lot of jargon and doublespeak. All right, it's clear cutting. All right, and then here in this row here, we've got the new paradigm based on ecological principles. The dominant value is nature's needs. The objectives are ecological integrity and resilience. The policy influencer is the public interests. The business model and the market are small to medium-sized local businesses and a competitive open market. Outcomes are a high value of products, and the products themselves from forestry would be value-added wood products. And the other products would be non-timber forestry products. What are some non-timber forestry products? Mushrooms. What? Berries. What else? Medicinal plants. Yeah. Recreation. Mental health. Wildlife. Cultural sites. Drinking water. Tourism. Bear? Air. Air. All right. Decision making. Decentralized and community centered. Silviculture. It's about biodiverse species and conserving primary forests. The logging methods, well, sometimes it goes by different names. I think we should talk a little bit more about partial cutting, because Herb's here today and he can help us to define that. But whatever logging is done and where it's permitted should be constrained by nature's needs. The industrial paradigm and corporate control are deeply woven into BC forestry legislation and policies, which are complex. Under the current provincial legislation, tenures held by corporations are protected. Professional reliance is written into policies and operations, and unfortunately, I see a lot of local politicians who defer to industry on every question. Corporations are left to monitor themselves, and there are no significant consequences for companies that are degrading the land or eliminating local jobs. A little slap on the wrist, little recommendation from the Forest Practices Board. So it's no wonder that tenure holders have no motivation to shift from an industrial paradigm to an ecological paradigm that would benefit nature and communities. We're not going to get anywhere by chipping away at the forestry legislation one policy at a time. It's too deeply ingrained. It's time for a strategic shift, a complete restructuring through a new Forest Act. Here's what we're recommending. So to start with, the tenure system will be eliminated. Here comes the hate. There will be no buyback of tenures from companies. More hate coming my way. They've been sufficiently compensated over the years with enormous profits and subsidies from taxpayers. The people of BC do not owe them anything more. So let's look at how to transition. The current Forest Act has to be repealed, and this means that all licenses will be dissolved. And there's a mechanism within the current Forest Act to do that at the 5-year renewal time of every license. And so depending on the term of each license, the transition period would be from 1 to 5 years. And this would give the forest industry and communities time to transition and adjust. It would also provide the government with the mechanism to achieve an orderly shift, both economically and administratively. These are the acts that must be repealed. I'm not going to specify them. The new Forest Act must also include a specific regulation for the Private Managed Forest Land Act that concerns people mostly on Vancouver Island and in the Kootenays. So the same principles of nature-directed stewardship as proposed for public land would apply to private land. I'm going to talk about that NDS, nature-directed stewardship, in a moment. The Water Sustainability Act should not be repealed, but should be fully implemented by completing its regulations, specifically for the Water Sustainability Planning Regulation. This is a powerful piece of legislation that was never enacted and would fully support the new Forest Act that we're recommending. Now, a new Forest Act will be a complex piece of legislation. It'll be written by government lawyers and legislative experts working on behalf of the BC public and Indigenous peoples. So we've identified 3 key priorities that must be the basis of the new legislation. And the intention is that the principles, standards, and structures delivered in our proposal and our backgrounder will be augmented and developed by public servants using the appropriate legal language and legislative mechanisms. The new Forest Act is founded in principles that provide a system that, under Priority 1, preserves and restores natural ecosystem integrity and resilience. Under Priority 2, gives Indigenous peoples and BC residents a say in what happens in the forest ecosystems that affect them. Under Priority 3, it builds stable community-based jobs and local economies that strengthen the larger BC economy.